Welcome, dearly adored, chosen ones. Stealing from a stranger is a felony. Steal from a designated person. It's a cosmic calamity. Let it sink in, because what you're going to see is more than simply courtroom drama. It's a beautiful narrative twist that has been building from infancy. And spoiler alert, God does not lose cases. The whispers are becoming louder. The records are emerging, and someone is going to discover the hard way that karma saves receipts in high resolution. This isn't just another family feud over land. No, this was a planned theft disguised in funeral costumes and false embraces. They assumed you were too innocent, damaged, and silent to fight back. But here's the issue about the selected ones. We do not merely ascend. We revive. And when we return, we bring spreadsheets, timestamps, and angelic backup to courtroom accuracy. Oh, and don't forget the individuals who once assured you it wasn't about money. It is about love. When it came time to divide the estate, I suddenly lost my memory. Isn't it interesting how quickly our family grows? That is my inheritance. When a signature reaches the will. But guess what? You did not just stroll in and win this case. You strode in, making the gavel twitch. So buckle up, because the truth has been hidden for far too long. Today, criminal charges are piling up, and no amount of crocodile tears will stop them. Let's get to it. Number 1, they battled you for something that was already yours. Now the law is chasing them for stealing what was never theirs. They fought you for something that already had your name on it. Something that didn't need dispute, manipulation, or deception since it was yours from the start. You did not steal it. You did not ask for it. You merely had the bravery to claim what was already part of your destiny. But they didn't see things that way. They saw you as a danger just because you stood up for yourself. They attempted to make you feel like an intruder at your own table, as if you were insane for asking questions, as if you were inciting unneeded strife by just protecting what was legally and spiritually yours. What's astonishing is how confidently they acted in their wrongness, tampering with paperwork, relocating assets behind closed doors, whispering in corners, and requesting favors. All of this was done with the hubris of folks who thought they'd never be caught. They assumed the system would protect them, that you wouldn't know how to use it, and that you'd leave out of tiredness or terror. But what they didn't comprehend was that the same mechanism they used to capture others was now paying attention. This time, their names are being reviewed. Currently, criminal charges are being contemplated. The evidence they believe they had destroyed is being recovered, brushed off, and joined like jigsaw pieces. The falsehoods are unraveling quicker than they can explain away. Their own documentation betrays them. You battled smartly, not dirty. They misjudged how much you had matured. They expected you to break down. Instead, you interrupted the cycle. The law is closing in, and this is the bit they didn't expect. The same courtroom where they sought to convict you is now being used to prosecute them. Every fraudulent signature, suspicious bank transfer, an email they believed was destroyed is now being highlighted. You did not just win the inheritance. You revealed their character. You did not ruin them. They accomplished this on their own. You just revealed the truth and allowed justice to breathe. And now you get the inheritance, while others bear the repercussions. Number 2, they attempted to portray you as greedy, but the receipts indicate they had been feeding off you like leeches for years. They attempted to present you as greedy, as if you came out of nowhere to take what did not belong to you. They mumbled things like, "Look at them just turning up now that there's money involved," as if you hadn't been quietly suffering while they feasted on the exact legacy they tried to take away from you. However, the truth has an unusual way of manifesting itself numerically. Because when the receipts were retrieved, the true story came out, and they had their hands in the cookie jar the whole time. They were depleting accounts, shifting assets, and taking advantage of advantages that were supposed to be shared or were never intended for them in the first place. They labeled you entitled, yet they were the ones reaping the benefits of someone else's legacy, doing so behind closed doors as if no one would notice. You were not the greedy one. You were the only one who dared to question, where is the money really going? And that question blew everything wide open. They were not prepared for the degree of evidence you presented. You had time frames, statements, signatures, and discussions that they promised would remain confidential, all written out and tied to legal papers. It was never about money for you. It was about getting plundered while gaslighting you into believing you were the issue. They attempted to change the script, but they didn't anticipate the receipts to reverse it. What's more, most of what they seized was unnecessary. It wasn't about survival. It was ego control. A perverse desire to keep you little while they played rescuer with stolen blessings. However, now that everything is out in the open, the mask has fallen and everyone can see who they really are. Not the peacemakers or the responsible ones, but the silent leeches who use sorrow, trust, and familial relationships for selfish gain. You did not harm their reputation. You exposed their actions. And it turns out that the most greedy character in the narrative was the one working hardest to conceal the truth. The court now sees it, and the charges will shortly follow. Number 3, they did not expect you to study the tiny print, but you examined the plan. They were counting on your ignorance. They assumed you would remain confused, upset, and overwhelmed, too damaged or preoccupied with grief to read the tiny print. They figured you wouldn't dare to ask questions, much alone read between the lines. That was their first error, because while they were busy planning behind your back, you were learning things they never intended you to know. You weren't just responding. You were researching. You didn't simply get emotional. You become educated. They were used to dealing with folks who quit up when things became too complex. However, you refused to give up. You sat with the papers they attempted to conceal. You studied the legal terminology that they believed would terrify you. They thought you would never ask the hard questions. You paid attention. And as you became more aware of what to look for, the trap they had set for you began to unravel. You didn't just show up with allegations. You arrived with facts. Real facts. Signed papers, dates that did not correspond, and amounts that did not add up. You presented such strong evidence that the whole courtroom had to sit up straighter as they tried to make you appear like an emotional mess. You moved like someone who has read the plan. Every step you took was premeditated. Every paper you gave put them into situations they couldn't get out of. They never expected you to outwit them. That is what worries them most. They believed that their head start, allies, and access would give them lasting rule. But you turned the game around with calm, clarity, and honesty. There's no drama, just receipts. You didn't have to shout. You did not need to threaten me. Allow the papers to speak. You let the facts reveal the scam. You transformed their web of falsehoods into a case so obvious that even their own lawyer had to exercise caution. That is the difference between someone who responds and someone who is awake. They attempted to deceive you with papers, but you interpreted it as prophecy. And now the trap they created for you has become the very paperwork that is likely to get them in big trouble. Number 4. Their lives were not simply revealed. They were kept in legally binding papers that cannot be undone. They believed they were being slick by telling falsehoods in private, distorting tales at family gatherings, and creating timelines that only made sense in their brains. They got away with it for very some time. People believed them. You were labeled theatrical, resentful, or deluded, but they didn't expect this. They didn't just lie. They left a paper trail. And now those trails have been stamped, filed, signed, and sealed in court documents, which cannot be wiped with another phony apology or contrived discussion. This isn't some familial gossip you're after anymore. Deceit is now recorded with case numbers, government stamps, and witness evidence. Their fabricated tales were convincing enough to sway a few naive individuals, but they were not strong enough to withstand judicial examination. And when everything was exposed, their falsehoods couldn't survive. They fell in the same ink that they attempted to bury you in. You didn't need to destroy them. They accomplished it all on their own. And the best part, they did it in writing. They signed the documentation that now demonstrates their desire. Arrogance became proof. Their greed led to a confession. They attempted to make you seem dangerous, but in their haste to hide their tracks, they stumbled over their own inconsistencies. Their tale is now unchangeable. It is maintained in cold, hard legal documents, including notarized statements, bank records, emails, contracts, and letters, all of which are dated, sealed, and point back to them. There is no going back, no rewriting history, no spin that can reverse what has already been accepted and stamped as reality. The mechanism they believed would safeguard them has now permanently recorded their manipulation. Their falsehoods are no longer kept hidden behind closed doors. They're permanent evidence in a case that might cost them their liberty, reputation, or both. And the greatest part, you didn't need to yell. You didn't need to plead. You just allowed the truth to be spoken via papers that they naively believed would protect them. Instead, they notarized their own demise. Number 5. They misinterpreted your quiet for weakness, but you were accumulating ammo throughout the stillness. They assumed your silence indicated you had given up. They mocked your stillness, assuming it meant defeat. They believed you had no fight left in you, that you were too overwhelmed, exhausted, or soft to fight back. They failed to learn, however, that stillness does not necessarily imply surrender. Sometimes it's all about strategy. While they were busy talking trash and acting filthy, you were monitoring, accumulating, and storing every lie, contradiction, and shady action, as if it were proof. Because it was. You weren't just sitting motionless. You were growing deadly as you prepared. Every time they ridiculed you behind closed doors, you made mental notes. Each time they misjudged you, they handed you an edge. You knew if you moved too soon, they'd notice you approaching. So you waited. You were wise, not terrified. You let them get comfy with their plans. Allow them to slip up. Allow them to compose the precise tale they will ultimately have to account for. When you exposed your hand, it was too late for them to mop up the mess. You had everything lined up: facts, dates, papers, discrepancies, no emotion, just accuracy. You weren't motivated by revenge. You were propelled by clarity. The case you prepared was so strong and detailed that even the most experienced liars couldn't get out of it. The beauty of it all. You accomplished it without theatrics. You let the truth do the talking. They always presume that the loudest person wins, but you reminded them that true strength does not make noise. It moves on purpose. You were not attempting to prove anything. You were about to destroy everything constructed on falsehoods, but the exact calm they ridiculed has turned into a tempest that is ripping their whole illusion apart. You did not just wait in quiet. You weaponized it, and suddenly it's silent. Dom is administering justice with a ferocity they never expected. Number 6. You did not just win an inheritance. You ended a generational curse. This issue was never only about land, money, or tangible things. It was about legacy. It was about finally standing up to a cycle that had been silently repeating for generations, the kind of dysfunction that hides behind titles like tradition and respect while allowing betrayal, manipulation, and spiritual theft, the kind of patterns that taught family members to remain silent, suffer in silence, and let the most toxic person in the room lead the bloodline like a dictator in a family photo. You haven't simply won a legal fight. You broke into a vault of generational ruin. You uncovered the same thing that had held everyone mentally and emotionally bound for years. This case exposed every skeleton in the closet, including favoritism, deception, backdoor agreements, and abuse hidden under polite grins and Sunday pleasantries. You revealed what everyone knew but was afraid to express out. The money just scratched the surface. What you really received was the chance to break the pattern, which you accepted with courage, clarity, and a spirit that shouted, "No more pretending, no more silence, no more hiding behind family loyalty while evil runs the show." That's what they were not prepared for. They expected this to be another silent sweep under the rug, another generation coerced into obedience. But not this time. You did not just collect what was due to you. You pushed the whole lineage to face itself. You created a dysfunctional system. Look in the mirror, and it has broken. The inheritance wasn't merely something you got. It was something you redeemed. And you accomplished more than simply transform your own life. You altered the spiritual blueprint of everyone in your bloodline, including your future children, siblings, nieces, and nephews. They'll never have to bow to the same twisted building again since you burn it down. You did not just win. You have broken the spell. And amid the ashes of their manipulation, you sprouted something they did not anticipate. Truth number 7. They intended you to be the scandal, but now they're the headline. They were trying to dominate the narrative before the truth could speak. So they moved quickly, telling falsehoods about you and whispered half-truths to anybody who would listen, twisting events so that they seemed to be the victims. They wanted others to think you were unstable, entitled, furious, or worse, a danger to the family. They understood precisely what they were doing. Smear you first. And even if the truth got out, people would be too prejudiced to trust you. But here's where it all failed. You did not bite. You did not lash out, lose your mind, or erupt in front of witnesses as they expected. You remained grounded. You let them run their tongues and hang themselves with their own rope. And when true facts began to emerge, documents, messages, audio recordings, and contradictions, the house of falsehoods they created started to crumble with alarming speed. Now the people who worked so hard to designate you as the issue are being probed. Their identities are appearing in court documents. People who are unconcerned with their sob tales or social standing are debating their conduct. The same tongues who confidently lied about you are now have to justify themselves under oath. And it does not seem good. The tale they attempted to create has entirely backfired on them. The so-called scandal they attempted to attach to your name has now been glued to theirs, with legal ramifications. The drama they attempted to create around you has become their reality. They didn't just project. They confessed using projection, and the legal system recognized the pattern. They intended to deflect attention away from their misdeeds by destroying your reputation. But now their reputation is deteriorating. Not from gossip, but from concrete proof. You didn't need to reveal them. They reveal themselves in an attempt to bury you. The only difference is that you rose, and they are now buried beneath the falsehoods they created. They wanted your name to be dirty. Their name is now engraved in headlines over which they have no control. Number 8. The court did not just hear you. They believed you because the truth pulsed. You did not enter the courtroom searching for compassion. You stepped in with something considerably more powerful, an irrefutable fact. You did not come with theatrics. You did not have to weep on cue or put on a display. Your reality did not need makeup or editing. It arrived rough, lived in, and completely alive. And when you talked, people did not just listen. They sensed it. The energy moved. You were not just providing your side of the story. You were exposing a reality that cut through the chaos, deception, and created falsehoods. You did not fumble over your remarks because you had not rehearsed. This was not a speech. This was your life. Every statement you said had weight because it was based on experience, grief, perseverance, and unchanging truth. You did not need to exaggerate anything. You did not need to embellish the truth. It stood alone, breathing, throbbing, obvious. They anticipated someone emotional and broken, easily dismissed. Instead, they encountered clarity, consistency, and conviction. You did not flinch. You did not get lost in the hubbub. You stepped in prepared and confident in what you knew to be true. Not because you were coached, but because you experienced it firsthand. The whole room was aware of it. The judge could sense it. Even their attorneys sensed the change. The painful realization that you were not there to win a war. You were there to disclose one. This is why they believed you. Not because of your tone or look, but because truth has frequency. When it's genuine, it doesn't need to shout. It simply sat there, undeniable and unshakable. The court didn't just hear your tale. They felt the weight of a life that had been violated and betrayed but not shattered in that instant. Justice did not just become feasible. It became unavoidable because the truth was not a visitor in that courtroom. It was the one wielding the gavel. Number 9. They assumed their titles would shield them, but their position became Exhibit A. They were so enamored with their own titles that they believed they were untouchable. The executors, elders, wealthy individuals, and self-appointed custodians of the family lineage all assumed that their standing would protect them from responsibility. They felt that since they had authority, they could distort the facts, alter history, and silence any opposition. But they were mistaken. In fact, the same titles they held to with pride ended up casting the clearest light on their depravity. They acted as if their position gave them the authority to steal, control, and silence. And for a time, it worked. People deferred to them. They were seen as accountable. The family's pillars, those who knew best. But power without ethics is a ticking time bomb. And as the inquiry progressed, it became evident that their power was not based on character. It was inherited, utilized, and abused. All of the signatures they believed would safeguard them are now being challenged. Every choice taken on behalf of the family is being scrutinized. Their job did not protect them. It exposed them. They signed the papers and shifted the assets. They treated you like an outsider while pretending to be the castle's king or queen. Everything is being laid exposed. Instead of being perceived as trustworthy leaders, they are now seen as betrayers. Their failure was not caused by your opposition. It was due to their entitlement. They were not intimidated by your assertion. They were intimidated by your clarity, because once you stopped backing down, their whole act came apart. Their hubris ruined their credibility. Their fixation with control ultimately ruined their legacy. The courtroom no longer sees them just as family members or professionals. It views them as defendants with titles. They are no longer badges of honor. They are Exhibit A in a case proving that misuse of authority is not just immoral, but also illegal. Number 10. You uncovered a family secret so deep that it required a legal earthquake to break free. This instance did not just shake a table. It rocked a foundation constructed on decades of suppressed truth, forced togetherness, and prepared smiles. You didn't merely discover a family secret. You shattered a quiet that had been passed down over years, if not generations. Everyone sensed something was wrong. People sensed the tension, partiality, secret bargains, and unsaid hurts. However, no one spoke about it. It was simpler to shield the image than to face the virus till you. You were the one who dared to go where no one else would. Enter the vault of denial. They kept their transgressions hidden beneath picture albums, church seats, and respectable titles. You refused to continue pretending. You refused to remain silent for the sake of maintaining the peace. In actuality, the tranquility was nothing more than a controlled hush based on dread. And when you stood out, you did more than simply raise a commotion. You caused a legal earthquake that forced everyone in the family to seek shelter. What they sought to keep buried spilled out. Illegitimate papers, false wills, fake signatures, financial exploitation, and manipulation. Everything began unraveling the minute you tugged one thread. And even those who were not directly engaged had to confront the reality. For far too long, this family had operated like a well-dressed cult, putting appearance ahead of justice. But what made your position so effective is that it did not just free you. It caused a rupture in the cycle. You revealed what others were too frightened to even mention. You pulled the truth out of hiding. In doing so, you provided future generations with an opportunity to be cleaner, freer, and more honest. No more secrets passed down as heirlooms. Lies are no longer accepted as cultural norms. You pushed the past to face trial, giving the future a new start. They may despise you for what you disclosed, but they realize it had to be done, and you were the only one who had the bravery to crack the quiet wide open. A number. You weren't battling only for money. You were struggling to be recognized as human. This argument was not about material possessions. It was about being seen as authentic, worthwhile, and visible. For too long, you were regarded as an afterthought, as if your presence didn't matter. They saw your presence as a nuisance that could be ignored until they required something. They used your quiet as license to delete you, and your grief as excuse to ignore you. However, when it came time to split the assets, your name became very important. Not to include you, but to remove you again. More official. They didn't only aim to deprive you of an inheritance. They sought to utterly remove you from the tale, as if you never existed, as if you did not belong. Your bloodline link seems less legitimate than theirs. That's what made it so personal. It was not about the property. It was about how they regarded you as an outsider in a family you were born into. You were battling not for what they had, but for who you really are. You were not asking for more. You demanded recognition. You demanded not to be ignored. I refused to be silenced. Not to be rendered invisible because it suited their story. They wanted to pretend you didn't have the right to speak. That your position in the family did not come with inheritance, affection, or legality. But you reversed the script. You claimed there would be no more disappearances to protect the peace. You stood up not just for money, but also for your name, identity, and birthright. And that is why it struck them so strongly. They understood exactly what they were doing. They know they sought to banish you without explanation in order to maintain everything in the hands of people they considered worthy. But they misjudged your power, presence, and right to be here. You did not merely battle for assets. You struggled for recognition as a whole human being against a family that wanted you to shrink, disappear, or remain silent. And win or lose, your voices are no longer optional. It is recorded, respected, and here to stay. A number. You were the family's black sheep until you became the shepherd of justice. They always had a name waiting for you. Difficult, unstable, very sensitive, too much. You were the family's favorite scapegoat, the one they blamed when things went wrong. They mocked her in private but grinned in public. They labeled you the black sheep since you did not follow their unwritten guidelines. You questioned what felt wrong. You spotted what others claimed not to see. And for that, they banished you. Perhaps not physically, but rather emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. You were portrayed as the issue when all you did was refuse to let their dysfunction. They didn't expect the black sheep to be the one with the clearest eyesight while they were busy sustaining illusions. You were beginning to see through them while they perfected their public image. You were searching for the truth while others spoke behind her back. You were preparing silently. And when the time came, the inheritance disaster burst and secrets poured out. You weren't astonished. You were ready. You did not merely get into a legal war. You accepted a calling. You became the one with the courage to tackle what others were too terrified to identify. You battled not just financial concerns, but also power dynamics, manipulation, deceit, and favoritism. You confronted the wolves without armor and did not flinch. That's when everything changed. That's when the labels stopped adhering, since the insane one was now holding the receipts. The law began to side with the rebellious one. The same individuals who sought to silence you are now seeking your forgiveness. However, justice does not bend for guilt trips. Justice does not hesitate because the wolf is now dressed in sheep's clothes. You did not seek for vengeance. You asked for the truth. Even when it comes to family, the truth never favors anybody. You were never the black sheep. You were the first to break the spell, prepared to sacrifice comfort in order to acquire understanding. The one brave enough to lead a legacy out of deception and into the light. You didn't just endure the system. You overthrew it. A number. Although the will was transformed, fate remained unchanged. They honestly believed they had the ultimate word. They messed with legal papers as if they were rearranging furniture, changing names, adjusting percentages, and making alterations beneath the radar. They too became brazen, behaving as if no one would notice, as if their falsehoods would slip through the cracks without punishment. But they neglected one thing. Paper does not have greater power than purpose. They may have changed the will, but they could not change what was already written in the spirit. They considered their heredity as something they could manage, as if tampering with ink and signatures could undo a heavenly mandate. They misjudged how well protected you were because, while they were rewriting contracts, heaven was maintaining covenants. There was something larger behind you, something they couldn't pay you to alter. You were always the legitimate heir, not because of a piece of paper, but via divine alignment. And when fate speaks, even if garbled, papers must make place. Every forged page became a boomerang. What they believed would safeguard their status revealed their true nature. And when the truth began to emerge, it did not come easily. It arrived with force. Suddenly, the attorneys they assumed would defend them started asking questions. The judges were seeing red flags. Investigators began to circle around because no matter how deeply they'd bury the truth, it would eventually surface. This is what occurs when something is divinely allotted. It refuses to remain concealed. Both courts, worldly and spiritual, are now in alignment. The truth is standing tall in two dimensions, and there is nowhere for them to hide. The worldly judges are doing their duties, but the spiritual court has already decided in your favor. And that is why everything is changing. This is why the falsehoods are falling quicker than they can be defended. They interfered with the will. They amended the documents. But they overlooked one critical detail. Destiny cannot be formed. What you own remains yours. No false signature can be stopped. What? Heaven has already signed off on the number. You didn't just win the case. You uncovered the whole bloodline darkness. Winning the lawsuit was just the beginning. The true effect was considerably deeper. Because what you actually accomplished was reveal the reality that they had been hidden for decades. It wasn't simply about one stolen fortune or a falsified will. It was about a trend. A sick secret system that had been operating beneath the radar for far too long. A network of secrecy, control, and spiritual abuse had been the standard within that bloodline. And you, the one they counted out, brought the whole affair to light. This was more than simply what they stole from you. It was about how they stole from everyone quietly, methodically, and with complete confidence that no one would ever call it what it was. There were hidden bank accounts with missing money. Family choices were decided behind closed doors, without the knowledge or approval of all those involved. There was emotional manipulation disguised as care, and it was all handed down like some bizarre custom. They were unprepared for someone like you. You did not only come with proof. You arrived with spiritual authority. You weren't just pursuing justice. You were facing corruption. They believed that if they could just silence you, they would be able to keep things quiet. But every time they attempted to quiet you, they simply exposed themselves more. Each denial revealed another discrepancy. Each phony apology exposed another flaw in the framework. The triumph is now official. However, the ripple effect has only just started. Because you didn't just get what was yours. You uncovered how they've been operating for years, perhaps decades. You pushed the family to look at themselves in the mirror. And the reflection isn't nice. Judgment has begun. And it is infectious. Others are now speaking out. Other relatives are asking inquiries. Their system is disintegrating because its basis of falsehoods, favoritism, and manipulation is finally being shattered. You did not just win. You flicked on lights in a home that had been dark for far too long. And now, every shadow they sought to conceal had nowhere to hide. They attempted to make you the villain. They attempted to stifle your truth, remove your identity, and take what was never theirs to claim. But in the end, they just exposed themselves. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about identity, justice, and legacy, and a spiritual conflict that was camouflaged as a legal struggle. You weren't just protecting property. You were recovering your birthright and exposing a lineage of deception that has existed for far too long. You didn't just survive the fire. You marched through it with documents, wisdom, and destiny. And when you spoke, the whole courtroom heard you. They felt the power of truth trembling, the exact basis of every lie that has ever been uttered under your name. You did not need to yell or sabotage. You allowed the facts to do the harm. You let the truth sit on the bench next to you, speaking louder than any performance could. And when the dust cleared, you didn't simply have a judgment. You were holding a generational transition. You didn't merely get what they attempted to steal. You ended the curse that permitted them to steal from others. You revealed secrets, destroyed illusions, and pushed judgment to fall precisely where it was supposed to. Not merely in a court of law, but also in the court of spirit. Their titles no longer serve to shield them. Their quiet will not protect them. The mechanisms they employed to hide their trails are now working against them. They expected the black sheep to go down softly. You just became the whistleblower of a whole lineage, and you did not come for vengeance. You came for solutions. And now that it's here, the truth has been proclaimed forever and openly, powerfully. Let this serve as a caution to anybody who attempts to change what heaven has already sealed. Because when a chosen one rises, justice does not knock. It enters with authority. If this message moved you, if you recognized your own tale in the words, if you got shivers because you've been deceived, erased, or underestimated and loathed, here is the place for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, not only to show your support, but to remain connected to truth, fearlessness, and raw spiritual force that does not play it safe. We are not sugarcoating anything here. We are exposing systems, shattering the quiet, and saying what most people are scared to say. If this video spoke to you, please like it because each like helps drive this truth into the algorithm, where others in need will eventually discover it. Comment here to let your voice be heard. You are not insane. You are not alone. And believe me, your experience is important. Let us create a community that looks beyond the performance and stands for something true. Share this video with someone who has been struggling quietly. Someone who needs assurance that they are not dreaming the unfairness. Let this video be the proof they've been looking for. This is more than just material. This is a heavenly encounter. And believe me, we're just getting started. So press the subscribe button. Because the truth is moving ahead, and you must be a part of it. God bless you.